everyone, this is our presentation on cultural differences on child rearing and entry into adulthood. Before we get started, please pause to read our learning objectives regarding the three main topics of sexual health, mental health, and physical health. Hi again, my name is Denise, and today I'll be talking about an issue of sexual health that affects many of us in society. There is a lack of transparency on sex education due to cultural differences and the stigma of talking about it, especially for ethnic minority families. Therefore, the individual's lack of knowledge and understanding about sexual health can lead to dangerous consequences as they grow up to become adults. Many of us live a bicultural or even multicultural life, and with every culture comes their traditions and norms that can be vastly different from one another, which results in this constant contradiction. I wanted to specifically focus on Asian American individuals and their experience. In Asian cultures, there is a very clear dichotomy between a public and private self, valuing deference, restraint, and saving face, as TiVo says. While sexual health is intimate and personal, for many Asian Americans, it's kept private to the point where it's not even talked about amongst families. Avoiding this sex education means that many of these individuals aren't clear about how to take care of themselves, and this could lead to dangerous and potentially life-changing consequences. The first study showed that only 11% reported practicing safe sex that comes with consistent condom use. The second study shows that Asian Americans have the highest rate of late intervention when it comes to HIV interventions. And the third study shows how Asian American women have the second highest percentage of abortions, while Vietnam as a country has the second highest rates of abortion in the world. Despite these difficult outcomes, it is still very hard to change cultural norms, and it's even more difficult for people who are living in both a dominant and minority culture to know what to do. So how can we address this bicultural conflict and lack of education when changing a whole culture is difficult? This is why sex education needs to evolve into something much more holistic to take into account these cultural differences.
Hi everyone, my name is Krisma and I'll be explaining possible solutions for schools to implement and create a more sex-positive learning environment. To sum up everything that Denise mentioned, there are three issues consistent amongst cultural groups. One, there's a lack of transparency surrounding sex ed. Two, individual lack of knowledge can lead to dangerous consequences as adults. And three, instead of changing cultural norms, sex ed needs to be modified to take into account these cultural differences. According to the University of Bristol School of Social and Community Medicine, Dr. Pandora Pound argues that in order to make progress, we must understand the teachers leading it. In her qualitative study, she studied how teachers feel about leading these courses. Number one, teaching young people about sex and relationships will encourage sexual activity. And two, advocating for higher education allows young people to the skills necessary for safe, fulfilling relationships and to take responsibility for their health. In the next slide, I'll be talking about possible solutions. So although Denise focused on Asian American adolescents specifically, I've provided three general solutions that are useful for all cultures and age groups around the world. The first solution is to make classes more sex positive. The goal here is to focus on topics that students actually want to learn about to create an encouraging environment. According to Dr. Janie Ward, Harvard graduate and current Simmons University professor, schools struggle to accept that some young people are sexually active. In sex ed courses, students were hesitant to speak up because boys were ashamed of how little sexual knowledge they had, and girls didn't want to risk sexual harassment if they participated. To combat this, it's important to reduce the stigma surrounding sex ed entirely. The next two solutions are examples of how exactly to do that. First, schools must provide inclusive and representative resources. The goal here is to maintain clear boundaries with students and prioritize anonymity. According to Dr. Ward, students were uncomfortable with their own teachers leading sex ed and found it awkward to see them around school. For example, her observational study concluded that minority students didn't want to listen to their white teachers because they didn't understand the severity of cultural differences. In response, Dr. Ward suggests that classes should be led by experts from the same culture group as students. Another option is for schools to encourage students to visit sexual health clinics. This is a credible resource and provides a greater sense of confidentiality, especially for students who struggle with embarrassment in the classroom. The final solution is to start from home and educate parents about having the talk. According to USC School of Nursing, there's a disconnect between the information students get at school and what they find on the internet, so it's hard to find someone that they can trust. USC encourages family nurse practitioners to facilitate open conversations between parent and child. By creating an equal learning environment, they share a common goal to maintain positive self-esteem and take responsibility for their sexual health.
Hi class, I'm Tiffany, and for this section, Judith and I will be zeroing in on how cultural differences in child rearing connect to mental health. These are our general areas of focus that will be elaborated on in the coming slides. I wanted to start off talking about an article which links different parenting styles of immigrants and child-adolescent mental health particularly of Asian and Latino immigrant families. It argues that parents have a central effect on how their children will experience acculturation, social relationships, and mental health. Many of the mental health problems in immigrant families arose from the acculturation gaps, which led to dysfunction in parent-child relationships, which tended to be internalized for Asian American children and externalized for Latin American. Parents of both demographics were found to value authoritative parenting, which is said to promote positive mental health outcomes. But they also incorporated harsher culture-specific methods such as the Asian tiger mom strategy and the Latino no-nonsense strategy. One important factor in parenting style involves discrimination, which when experienced by a parent in Asian American families increases parental hostility, which can lead to children acting out and showing depressive symptoms. As for Latin American families, discrimination and child adolescent depression was made worse if the parents did not acculturate well. This slide is a general summary of the last slide with the addition of information taken from an article measuring the likelihood of immigrant families seeking mental health services. In addition to poor relationships formed by acculturation mismatch, the different ways that immigrants view mental health in general make parents less likely to seek mental health services, which then increases the transgenerational trauma that also increases negative CAMH outcomes. This becomes a cycle that further and further postpones help seeking that could mediate these problems. The next area of focus is interventions. For policymaking and implementation, barriers include poor public awareness alongside low political willingness, the lack of CAMH data and evidence, stigma against mental disorders, the shortage of CAMH resources, biased culture value towards children, adolescents, and CAMH, and unintended consequence of support from international organizations and non-government organizations. These 6 challenges were taken directly from an article that examined 7 different LMICs, their existing policies and cultural barriers to producing helpful policies and interventions. The children in these cultures tend to be viewed as property of their parents, whom are left as the only determinants in CAMH outcomes, which explains an overall lack of existing policy and development of new ones.
Interventions, more specifically the delivery of mental health support, from an article done in review with the World Health Organization and the United Nations Refugee Agency. It discusses current challenges and future directions to improve mental health care and psychological support in humanitarian emergencies, such as cultural beliefs, local healthcare systems, traditional practices, attitudes, and previous experiences. It basically talks about how all of these are major components in the delivery and effective implementation of these programs, to make sure that they're minimizing risk of harm and maximizing benefit to optimize the efficient use of all the resources that they have, and making sure that they potentially don't have any unintended consequences. Another article that talks about how parents perceive are the barriers and facilitators to accessing psychological treatment for mental health problems in their children. Basically 3 major components: circumstances, attitudes, and knowledge. Circumstances mainly being like living in rural areas and having the inability to have easy transportation to these locations. Attitudes, such as the attitudes they have on mental health professionals, or just potential consequences that they can have from seeking help. And then the third one, knowledge, just like the existence or severity and overall impact of these large problems that they're not informed on. And most common barrier was for seeking help was a perceived negative attitudes from other people, or even from minority populations. It was language or cultural barriers. How does this affect children's mental health? So a study that looked at the impact of parental bullying on their children for 8 different countries around the world: Argentina, France, Germany, Greece, Pakistan, Peru, Poland, and Turkey. Basically looking at psychological control, so just as the intrusions that this has on the psychological development of the child and how this can cause drastic negative outcomes. And then limiting child autonomy, so giving the child this feeling of being disrespected, what leads them to have even more negative outcomes. And then third one being cultural dependency. So this showed that among the countries that were involved in the study, that the varying life situations in different cultures can have an impact on their psychopathology of internalizing and externalizing mental health symptoms.
Hi everyone. Now we're going to transition to the next portion of the presentation, which is physical health. I first wanted to start out by talking about child-rearing methods that many parents have. First, childcare is an important part in ensuring that kids are able to thrive. This is because children depend on their parents and caregivers, and they need to ensure that their care is geared towards growth and physical development. The physical health of children is needed to achieve emotional, social, and behavioral competence, which are all very important to ensure that they succeed later in life. The way that parents decide to bring up their kids will have a huge influence on the way their child will grow up and develop. This includes parents having a role in their healthcare, vaccinations, child's nutrition, and physical activity. Throughout the rest of this portion of the presentation, we will be focusing on those 4 topics. So as I mentioned before, parents have a role on their children's healthcare. A mother's culture will have a huge influence on their decisions in terms of their own healthcare and the healthcare of their child. Their culture will also influence their decision on having coexisting healthcare systems, such as the use of allopathic and alternative medicine or traditional Western medicine. Traditional and allopathic medicine used during pre- and postnatal periods was seen in both low and high-income countries around the world. Such treatments were used to try to improve women's reproductive health, pregnancy, or breastfeeding concerns. The reasons for traditional medicine use was because of their cultural understandings about health and illness. Many mothers obtained information about traditional medicine from their elders, such as their mothers or grandmothers. So next we're going to talk about vaccinations. The decision to vaccinate can be influenced by country-specific factors such as location, government recommendations, and healthcare systems. It's important to look at the household structure and the advice a member can give to have the child be vaccinated. In most cultures or countries, the younger members would recommend vaccinations versus the older generation. Rates were lower in European and Eastern countries and higher in Western. Many parents were advised that they were more likely to vaccinate. Cultural differences within households can influence their decisions on vaccinations. For example, in Japan and China, many elders refuse to get vaccinated due to East Asian cultural beliefs.
All right, hey guys, now we'll be looking at eating habits in different cultures and how it relates to child rearing methods. So to start off, there are basically 4 types of parenting styles system to how parents decide to feed their children. They are authoritative, authoritarian, indulgent, and uninvolved parenting. So to give you more background, indulgent is when parents let their child eat what they want and they also get to choose the foods they prefer. Authoritative is when parents negotiate with their kids about what they can eat and they praise them if they make the right decision. Uninvolved is when parents don't discipline their children in relation to food. There's no set like system as to when they eat or what they eat. And then authoritarian is when they parents require the child to eat certain foods and avoid others, and there are very strict rules and expectations. And if they don't follow those rules, then they will be punished. It's also very difficult to say what cultures align to what parenting style because it really differs from parent to parent and the influences they do decide to bring into the household and how that influences how they feed their children. However, what's predominantly common is the types of food we see each culture eat and what parents feed their kids. So examples are in Asian cultures, Asian households, it's mostly fish, poultry, the grain, the carb is mostly rice, fruit, veggies, and pickled items. And then in Latino households, it's mostly pork, goat, poultry. There's a lot of marination with veggies and the different meats, and their main staple carb is tortilla. Okay, and now we're going to look at the association of how exercise patterns and injury correlate to different cultures. So overall, adults and their cultural influences play a key role in how children stay active and maintain a healthy lifestyle in addition to their physical health. Exercising and playing encourages physical growth and prevents any health issues in the future. However, the environment these families and children live in can also determine the amount of physical activity that's possible. Most families and children who live in safer neighborhoods are those that are white and of a higher socioeconomic status, and they have access to playgrounds and parks where they can let their children play. But parents who live in more hazardous neighborhoods, most of these parents and families are those who are of the racial and ethnic minority, and they face a lot of obstacles such as high crime, lack of access to parks, and other safety issues. And because of these safety issues, safety is their priority, not letting their kids go out and play. And then in terms of injury prevention, parents can keep their children safe by using seatbelts, having them wear helmets and more outside the home. And the various methods they can use to ensure that their kids are safe at home are covering sharp points, keeping medicines out of reach, having functional smoke alarms, and having like a planned fire escape system. Another thing parents can do is also monitor when their children whereabouts, like where are they going, like at what time, and it can also prevent them from getting hurt. All right. Thank you guys. That's the end of our presentation. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us talk about child rearing methods. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. So thank you so much.